That's why it's so low.
Okay, so that way we got.
Who's that? I've been studying with him next year.
Peterson. You got yours looks like mine, so you got it. I got it on top.
Oh, Peterson, Jesse Peterson.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm trying to take out my paper thinking,
Yeah, we created
Rod's
that
still on his
engineering
bicycle.
course because there were a number of not the shop kids, but the engine, that weren't taking that fourth year of science. We needed to put them into the sciences because they're the kids that are over their sleeves. They weren't the brainiacs, they were going to go study research. They were going to figure it out and be the hands-on engineers.
We got so we thought you could take this. All the business is very
That's Colchester, right? No paper,
I'm not even sitting there. I'm doing okay. No, I'm gonna sit over here.
Is there anywhere here that if people sit, they're going to have a phone or?
You're welcome. We're trying.
Hello,
Jeff, how are you? Nice to see you. Always a good test run. It's always a test run.
But there you go, you don't have to worry about the shakes.
Yeah, for sure. Just it's a little book stand and
That was one of the questions he asked. Are you gonna be holding it for an hour? 'Cause I want to shake it.
never. I just put it, let it run, and then come back and shut it off, and it's done. So.
But it's only good for 30 days?
But we own it, so I can download it, and then so I can download it, archive it for ourselves, and then put it up to YouTube or wherever we want to do with it.
Sneaking in the back.
No paperwork.
We were just saying, there was no single.
Continue at the meeting. I was at
I have to leave at 6:25. So don't go next time. Yeah.
That's it right there.
Yeah, the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th course.
The executive suite?
Yes.
Those couches in the hall. Have extra square footage.
Yeah. Some of those pictures remind me of where my dad works in Mexico. He works at the Santa Fe Institute, and it's a beautiful glass building. Yeah, in the hills, and
You back here, we can move those chairs out of the way. You guys can. I just don't want you looking at the video saying, "Yep, Barbara Johnson." Why did she tell me?
I don't know that I'm gonna. Can I just move?
Yeah, so if you sit here, you're fine.
I'm not sure if I have to say this. So the chair. So stand up.
So just right, so this is the camera right here, and it goes like direct view right there. I see the back of her head, but I can see the screen now, so.
We should maybe even just move the chair.
Sure.
Nobody comes in.
I'm totally out though.
You're totally out.
Okay. I will call to order the tri-board meeting for Wednesday, October 15th, 2014 at 6:02 PM, calling the Board of Selectmen to order.
And I'll call the Board of Education to order. And I'll call the Board of Finance to order.
Any additions to the agenda? I'll note that we did have a deletion, item number 5. Pardon?
And we're live.
And we're live. Good. Okay. Item number 3, citizens' comments. Hearing none, we will move on to item number 4, presentation on the current status of the school building committee. Okay, Tom, do you want to do just a few minutes, and then we'll turn it over to the architect's presentation?
Absolutely, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Tyler. I'm the chair of the current building committee. Just give you a real brief update before we get into the details of what the architect is working on. As you know, the building committee was reformed to focus on the William J. Johnson Middle School project only. So that's our focus from the Board of Selectmen. That's what we've been doing. So we've engaged Tecton, and we have a new architect who you can meet tonight, Barbara, standing here. And so we're just very early in the phase, but as you recall, one of the issues that we discussed in the past was the communication of the project, not only to the boards, but also to the town. So one of the things that Stan asked us to do was to set some milestones up, so at certain points in the project, we will get together and talk about where the project is, so everyone has a good feel, and so that we can all hear each other's opinions and comments on the project, so that instead of it's, you know, the separate 3 boards that have interest in the project, so everyone together, so the tri-board, and we really appreciate everybody's flexibility in their schedules. I know that's difficult to get everybody together on the same night. So we started along that path with Tecton again to take a look at the school-only project. Their scope is to develop 3 options that will take to ultimately the boards to decide which one we want, put it out in a little bit of detail, and hopefully go to a spring referendum vote. So we've been meeting and talking about the new possibilities of a school-only project and what that might look like. We've talked about some of the different projections for enrollment, and I think the folks from Tecton are going to get into some details of that. And then just some very rough ideas of how things could be configured on the current site, and we're going to see some details of that tonight. And then another area that we're trying to be a little bit more proactive and communicate with is the cost element. So if you remember on the prior project, the cost kind of came in late and everyone was kind of wondering about how much it was going to cost, and then we saw the big number and it was quite a shock. So you're going to see tonight some very, very rough square footage type of costs. These are not detailed projections at any level, but just to give you a comparison of what some configurations of that site could look like, and some very, very ballpark costs and what those ultimate would be to the town, and the percentages that the Bureau of School Facilities, the state, will kick in. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tecton. If there are questions, of a general nature, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Anything detailed, hopefully we'll have the architect be able to answer them. So is there any questions of me about where we are in the process before the architect presentation starts? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Wazinski. I'm a principal at Tecton Architects.
Barbara Jocelyn, project manager.
We put together a brief PowerPoint presentation to kind of give you a status update as to where we are, and I'll try not to stand in your way. But please, if there's any questions along the way, just feel free to interrupt me. I may use some acronyms that I know all the time, I use all the time, they may be foreign to you, so just feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. But the intent is really just to give you an overall update on our progress. So the agenda is to, I have a couple slides on the programming update, school safety standards, which were implemented last year and will take effect on any projects moving forward. I don't have a lot of information on that other than they're released, they're out there. In a general description is, I use the words, and they used it in the report, SEPTED, it's crime prevention through environmental design. So it's basically layers of levels of security in the building, not only from the planning standpoint, from the site planning standpoint, from the building standpoint as far as doors, perimeter access, and then there's obviously the communication systems that we have to follow. So there are standards that we will incorporate along the way, and you'll see those along with the associated costs. Square footage concerns, I'm going to go over some population projections, and those directly relate to the allowable square footage of a building as it relates to the state regulations. A couple concerns that we cite, and which is not really new news, is there's two gymnasiums, rather large gymnasiums as a part of the existing middle school. We do have to figure out a way to kind of work those into this project, or have a strategy to address both of them. Renovation versus demolition, you'll see that in some of the summary tables that I've included. Of course, reimbursement percentage and costs, I think is important. I think along the way, you'll see costs tonight, but they're not set in stone. These are high level, broad brush, big picture look at the costs, okay? Options, at this point, they're called concepts. They're very high level concept plans showing you what potential configurations we're looking at and studying with the building committee, and then an anticipated schedule. So, program update, we've been working with the principal, assistant principal, and the building committee on what the program is every programmable space, every educational space, every space that has a room name label on the exterior of the door is identified in a spreadsheet in a list. This is a detailed description of the core academic spaces, 6th, 7th, and 8th. Science, math, language, arts, social studies. So there's a long list. It's probably about 6 or 7 pages now. But basically, the way it reads is, in 6th grade, 2 science classrooms at 1,800 square feet. That equals 3,600. It's about 30 students per room for 60 total students. And we use, so 6th grade area, or the pod, if you will, is around 11,200 square feet. That's the programmable or assignable space. That doesn't include corridors, shafts, wall thicknesses, all that kind of stuff. And you'll see that in a moment. I'll go over that. So we total up all these different categories along the way. This is kind of a summary table, and we end up with somewhere around 113,000 square feet. Now, the programmable space, the assignable square footage, is 78,000 and change. And what's important is this efficiency factor.
I'm going to interrupt for a minute, and if we unplug, there's a plug behind there, it's going to be a lot safer for you than before.
Sure. Am I making you nervous?
Yes. I'm the guy that has to answer to the Board of Finance about something.
I have liability insurance.
You don't have one back there, that's the problem, okay.
We're going to go in the
Go that way?
direction.
There's one in the floor, Stan,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
there's one in the floor.
What's that?
In the floor.
In the floor? Is that
Right,
still
in a-
operable?
In a metal thing there.
That brass thing.
Do they still work?
Find out in a second.
You need a quarter.
Or a key or something?
We'll add that to our notes. Floor options.
back up, I can tell you that we have, in regards to the program, we've been working closely with, principal and the vice principal of the school and going back and forth on that details of it and what's really needed and kind of really honing in on those numbers. So it's still a little bit of a work in progress, but we're getting closer to, I think, where we need to be. Actually, making changes right up till the end of this afternoon. And I'm not sure if any of you Board of Finance caught that there's an actual difference in the numbers. That would be why I'm predicting the question's gonna come up.
I was looking for page numbers and I'll put back to the latest.
We actually changed, standard for classroom sizes.
Well, it's like that now,
Yeah.
square feet.
We brought it down. Preemptive.
It's coming.
This is the more accurate.
Yeah, I was thinking, so there's handouts. Is that?
No, for the page before this isn't.
This kind of. All right, so hazards done. Efficiency factor, that is 1.45 for the buildings, 45% efficient. Typically, we see anywhere from 30 to 45%. I err on the side of caution at this point because obviously dealing with if there's additions and renovations, if that ends up being the option, the floor plan layout tends to be less efficient dealing with the existing building. If it's a new building, then you could probably pull it back down around 30 to 35%. So it's just something to keep in mind. But that's basically the total gross square footage is around 113 change. Important statistical information. This was released by the state, I think, earlier this year, just on some information on construction costs. Now, this is cost for all different types of schools, so just keep that in mind, all the way up to high school and vocational schools. So middle school tends to be kind of in that middle range, okay? So, but what you can see, it's been fairly consistent across the board, but we use that as a rule of thumb, along with, we obviously work with an outside estimating consultant that knows schools across the state, so they have a good historical database. At this point, we're using some round cost per square foot numbers. Okay, population, what's the right number? And the reason why this is important is because you take your population times the allowable square foot per student equals the total size of the building, okay? And it's pretty clear from the state standpoint as to how you can, what numbers you can use. It's basically an 8-year projection. I won't go over it in all those details, but essentially it's an 8-year projection by NASDAQ, which you already subscribe to. And with some room for some slight adjustments, if you see that there's been some movement due to magnet schools or something, you can quantify that. And as, you know, you could assume or presume that as you develop and renovate a building that you may recapture some of those students. There's some wiggle room in there, but not much. So there's 3 different numbers that I wanted to show just as a comparison, or we wanted to show as a comparison. The previous study, based on projections from last year, 2011, had shown 6th, 7th, and 8th around 230, 224, 242. So total population, student population of 700 students. This right here, this column, is the allowable square foot per student by state. So this is just its basic formula. So you just times student population times allowable square footage, total it up. You're allowed to build 117,000 square foot building for 700 students. Current enrollment right now is 631. It may be off by maybe a handful of students, but if you work the formula through, that's about 106,000 square feet. Based on the NASDAQ projections that you have, the current ones that you have, they should be updated in December, I believe. And that may change. I think they've already implied there might be a slight change in that on an upward fashion, but we're not quite sure yet. So if you took the projection back out in 2017-18, you'd be around 568 or 96,000 square feet. So NASDAQ is based on, I believe, the cohort survival method and some other statistical information. But you know, if it's trending down, the projection is going to trend down. If it ticks slightly different, obviously it's going to skew and affect all the numbers the further out you go. So you kind of want to stay as close as you can, you know, within say a 5-year window is what we recommended. We talked about that at our last meeting. Okay, so, again, please don't get tied to the cost. This is just an analysis for an all-new building, based on the square footages that I just had reviewed with you, the 117, 106, and 96, for different size schools for different populations. We're proposing an average construction cost for new middle school around $325,000. $325 a square foot. That is your bid day costs, and it's the same for each one of these. That's your bid day cost, so that's the building, site, parking improvements. The soft costs traditionally are around 25% of that number, so it's another $9 million. The soft costs are all the professional, survey, geotechnical, testing, and it's everything. If you take a building, you flip it upside down, you shake everything out, everything that falls out of there, is, furniture, equipment is all in that number too. Okay, so that gives you an idea. Building and site, all the soft furniture, professionals, all that kind of stuff, contingencies. So you end up with a number around 47.7. And again, this is broad brush look at it. Reimbursement rate for new schools, for brand new schools, is 51.43. So that's what the state would contribute, that's what the cost would be for. So it's slightly different than what we had shown. We confirmed that today, and the group asked us to kind of focus this in to make sure we're more accurate for this presentation tonight. So this is as accurate as we can be.
There's a 10% hit, you get 10% less money for building new than you do for renovate. So renovate as new is 61.43%.
Because we talked about being the reverse.
Yeah, when we had those discussions were based on alterations versus renovations. And when you talk, so alterations, for example, could be replacing windows in one project, replacing a roof in another project. So those things tend to drop because some of them are ineligible. This slide, I apologize, the numbers are small, but I'll go over one of them, is taking, all right, let's say we renovate 50% of the building, renovate like new. So we'll get that full 61.43%. So it's renovate like new, it's the roof and windows, it's taking the bones of the existing building, but upgrading all mechanical, lighting. You have to meet all the current codes for that. So what we did is we took basically half of the 117, put it into a renovation cost, half of it into new. We're projecting on historical information about $275 a square foot for a comprehensive renovation, renovate like new building, or portion of the building. That number is 16. There's, the existing building is about 142. I don't want to get too deep into the numbers, but if you're going to renovate and add, there's going to be a portion of the building that you're going to have to remove and take away. So we included that in the demo. The existing building is about 142, so that gives you the order of magnitude. It's larger than what really is needed at this point based on your population and your population projections. Okay, does that make sense? So you have renovate, the demo costs, and the new costs. Those all total here, plus your soft costs, similar to the last slide. This equals your total project cost down here. There's the reimbursement rate for the renovation is applied to that number. For new is applied to that number. I'm sorry, reimbursement for renovation and demolition. So this percentage is applied to those two. This percentage is applied to the new building. So that's what the state would pay, total reimbursement. That's what, for this size building, 117, that's around 20 million or so, 20.3 a cost to Colchester. Now this is just assuming that you proceed with 117,000 square foot building. And obviously the numbers are slightly different when you have a smaller building to renovate or add to. So you can see the comparison costs to Colchester for new, costs for add and reno. So these are high level, big picture. When I'm going to go through the options, when we start looking through the concepts, when we start refining them into options, we're going to put more appropriate numbers to that, to to that, depending on where we're renovating, where we're removing. We'll have some, basically, we're gonna kind of start focusing down onto the specifics, okay? This is just to orient everybody. We have a series of, next series of slides are basically the concepts that we studied, so these are just some areas that we have to refer back to them for reference. So there's 4 concepts that we put on the table at this point right now, just to start the ideas flowing, basically. So these are, again, not set in stone, but something to consider. This is a new and renovate, so this portion of the building hatched would be a renovate. That could be the new portion. We could put a new dining there. So this area, this shaded, the colored area, is basically in that range of 105 to 113 square feet. Okay, so it's an addition, renovation. The remaining portion would be removed, demolished, and restored to basically grass or field parking. We haven't really developed that far.
All of these plans are conceptually, we're trying to figure out how they can be phased so that students can occupy, like on that one,
Yep.
all the part that would be demolished, they could be occupying that part during the construction. Sequencing issues, obviously over the summer or whatever, but that's part of the thought behind all of these is what to do with the students during the construction.
Same concept, second floor, so what we're trying to do is keep the pods together, the 6th, 7th, and 8th, and that obviously needs to be explored with the educators to make sure we're doing the right thing, but conceptually, it gives you an idea of what this could look like. Okay, so concept 2 is all new. Putting administration, media center, the specialty spaces, the gym, and a dining over here, and then the 6th grade, and then 7th and 8th pods above, similar to the previous option. So it just gives you an idea, and this is where, remember I was talking about the efficiency factor. This is a much tighter building, so it could be, that 0.45 might go down to 0.35, so it'd be more efficient, less quarters, that kind of stuff.
So there you'd be demolishing the second gym.
Could. We've had conversations about you could demo everything around it and leave it and potentially use it in the future. We haven't really gotten that far, which is, we know that's an important feature, and to be honest with you, there's no real reason why you would demolish it, because it has big bonus. It's just the challenge, and I never really addressed it, the challenge with 2 gyms is when you take the square footage of the 2 gyms, then that takes away from some of the other educational space that you're allowed. So that's coming right out of, it's disproportional to the rest of the program, so it's a bit of a challenge. I'm not saying it can't be done, it's just, that's the
It can
challenge.
also be, I met with this BSF, the state folks, this afternoon actually, just to broad brush go over some of this they offered, and I took them up on it. And I talked to them about the 2 gyms, and asked if we could separate it, and if the town could just like own one of them, and there's no reason that can't happen. It's gonna be, a little tricky in the explanation phase, but there's certainly, there's no reason not to do that, so.
So we know that's a concern, we've heard it, and I'm sure that we're gonna work with the building committee to make sure we address it in one way, shape, or form. Concept 3, this is all new again, just a different style of building. It's a more longitudinal, instead of kind of a compact approach. Yeah, you still have your administration, your media center, then you have the core specialty gym. This is a building that could obviously easily be locked off at evening functions, so if the community is using this piece, the education space is kind of protected. It also helps sometimes with the security features, not saying that the previous option or concept doesn't, but it's just another way to lay out a building. So we were trying to free everybody's mind to explore these different options. Second floor of this concept 3 is really similar to the others, trying to keep these pods together, and I think that's the right approach at this point. It obviously still needs to be explored. And then lastly, this option, or concept, excuse me, is a renovate and addition, and we're looking at keeping this kind of pinkish color there as the piece to renovate. You may, although it's labeled gym, you may renovate the gym into educational space, media center. It could be, we don't know, but basically this footprint represents the square footage in that range again. gives you another idea. The challenges with this one obviously are some of the sequencing and the phasing that Barbara had mentioned, so it makes it a little bit more challenging. But the idea, and then second floor, again, kind of an odd theory or concept, but the idea is to discuss these, seek the community input. We've already received some input from the building committee members and some of the citizens. And develop 3 options, and those options will be a bit more refined, because there's questions on, all right, what is the parking? What is the site circulation? So it'll have, in a conceptual fashion, it'll be more refined, it'll show the site features, it'll show the building features. And then what the expectation would be is on one side or the other, you would see the benefits and concerns of each, so the pros and cons of each option, along with some cost implications to the town. So we want it to be a very fluid process to give as much information as we can for each of these concepts and further options. Schedule, I think Tom had mentioned it in a general sense previously, but there's a lot of work going on October, November, December to try to, this was our first kind of step. We thought it was appropriate to pause and give an update. We'll hear the feedback here and kind of course correct in some of the development of the options. Develop the options with what I just said, with all the options, the costs and schedule and phasing. What's that?
Options and concepts. Concepts and options are very concepts.
And present those to the building committee, community, most likely bring back to this tri-board for more input, and then start kind of the assistance with, finalizing the design, making sure that the public understands all the information that's included in the options. So with a target of, and this is still, this is loose anticipated schedule of sometime in the spring, April, May, right now.
Jeff, if I could just address, Barbara made a comment about the options and concepts and all that. We're trying to be very respectful. We gave a scope to the architect to develop 3 options to bring them to that a little bit more detailed phase. So we're trying to be careful and not have them go forward and develop 50 ideas, because that's not what we're paying them to do. They have a very, very limited scope to use as much info as we can, but explore new ideas at this early phase. Then we're going to kind of hone in on these 3 options and develop them a little bit, and then hopefully reach consensus between the community and obviously the boards and that. So we're trying to be careful to not scope creep it wild, and all of a sudden we have 50 different things that we're looking at, and there's no funding to pay them to do that. And part of the reason why we're trying to be real careful of that is, on the last iteration of the project, we really had one option that we looked at. And then when we got the cost estimates, that option, suddenly people had ideas and said, well, why don't you look at this, and why don't you look at that? And then we had to go back to the architect and say, yeah, this is totally out of scope, and here's some more money, go look at something else. So we're trying to avoid that, because that cost us a lot of time. So we're trying to stay focused on the schedule and limit the idea that we're going to scope creep and look at 100 different things. Like right now it's pretty free-flowing ideas, but we're going to take those ideas and really refine down to 3, and that's what their scope is. So we've been joking about all these similar sounding ideas. It's a concept, it's an idea, it's an option, but the scope that the town has with the architect is for 3 options. And so right now it's a little bit more open, but very quickly we're going to get to that point. And I think that's part of what we want to make sure that everybody here is on board, so that 6 months down the road we don't hear, oh well, why don't we look at this? It will be too late 6 months down the road to do that with the current scope.
So just briefly, we identified some next steps, and I kind of touched on a few of them. We're going to narrow down the student population projection. Obviously there's some regulations that we need to comply with, but there's a conversation there that we need to have to make sure we're using the right number, but we know the range. Verify the programming based on the population projection. Barbara's been working hard at that. I think that'll be kind of an ongoing process to kind of refine and tweak that, to make sure it still matches all of the educational specifications. Refine the concepts into 3 options. discuss the target budgets, that'll go along with those options. Prepare the refined options with the pros and cons and the opinion of probable costs, so try to give all the information related to each of the options that we're studying. And then, of course, coordinate with the building committee and then come back at as many times as we need to the tri-board to make sure that we have the information we need. So hopefully this was helpful and I can answer any questions that you have.
I have a curiosity question. I was looking at the diagrams in previous slides, and I'm looking at two halves. There's the 1947 building, that's the current Johnson School, and the 1963 building, that was the high school, or the previous intermediate school, the one you plan to demolish. Why did you choose the 1949 building over the 1963 building to renovate and the other one to demolish?
Part of that, we actually very quickly initially talked about doing it the other way in some of our really quick diagrams to begin with. And I think the consensus in the room at that time was the older portion of the building was less desirable.
The older portion being the current Johnson School.
Yeah, over this half over here. And part of that conversation, and then it kind of segued into getting rid of this buildings here creates a really nice energy, and we can do some fields that'll be shared between the elementary school. So it creates a better site from, the shared services standpoint of the town. So that was kind of part of that thought.
A couple other comments from a technical standpoint. ADA access issues, challenges here have always been a challenge. I think I know you probably spend more trying to bring this up to code with access points. That would be a bit of a challenge. And then the other piece that comes in a little bit down the road, but the floor-to-floor heights in here, in this building, and the multi-level building are pretty tight, and that makes it challenging from a building renovation standpoint because of the mechanical infrastructure that's in today's building. So, and when it's that tight, then it ends up being where you have to create soffits. You have to do special things to accommodate that. So those are some of the reasons. We could certainly, look at putting a finer point on that.
And if I might, Mary, if you look at what's identified as the specialty area, which is now permanent classrooms, the gymnasium, the central corridor, the administration area and media center, those were new in the late 80s. That was all new. So that's actually the newest, in this picture, that's the newest part of the entire complex. The wing that comes down, scheduled for demolition, that was the older building that was renovated to new in the 80s project. And then you've got the rest of the building. So the bulk of what's being saved in this iteration was the circa late 80s project.
And the
Yes.
47 stuff pretty much went.
The 47 stuff was the central school
Yeah.
is where the administration media center was. That one of the pictures that you had at one point had the ghost of the central school. And then it was the wing that at the time was the 7th and 8th grade wing that was a 40s era that was renovated to new.
And did I hear correctly that to renovate?
Did I have that right, Tony? Yep. Thank you. Tony and I were on that committee.
The other piece is, what you said before about renovations versus new. I'm looking at 61% to renovate, state reimbursement,
Yes,
and 51.43% to build new,
yes.
That's as it stands
as it
today.
stands now.
Yes.
Has that changed?
I believe they look at it yearly, but this is what it would be for if you were to apply.
Right, it's just,
That renovation.
I think we understood it to be the reverse in 2012.
The renovate as new number, they were very adamant, they being the state, when I talked to them this afternoon, that I make sure that everybody understands what renovate as new means versus alteration, which Jeff touched upon, and that's why the cost is higher, because it's a full, suits and nuts renovation.
Last year we were told the new construction would be at 61%. Or something around.
Yeah, I think, I looked at that spreadsheet, they were combined percentages of reimbursement.
Am I right?
Right, we wanted to understand the
I
opposite
think,
last time.
yeah.
It's confirmed. Well, that was what we had the other day, we just got this from the state, in the last week.
That's,
Yeah, no, yes, the last week we had the other one, because we thought it was the same number, so that's partially correct.
Has it always been
Different
lower
numbers?
for, I know it's always been different, but has it always been lower for new?
I do not, I don't know the answer, I can find out.
I've never noticed.
Yeah, we couldn't figure out why it was the other way around. We thought, well, why wouldn't they want us to save the bill?
Right.
Yeah.
They were actually really pushing the whole demolishing anything on the building, I mean, that was the message I got today was,
Was what?
to renovate everything and not demolish. And I, you know, it was a conversation I was having really was more in line with, well, we have 142,000 square feet, you have a projection that's showing that you're at somewhere in the 110,000 square feet. What do we do with that difference? How do we handle that?
Now, there's different,
There's
slightly
rules.
different approaches as well. Page is still there, but, Kermit and Bob Summer are new, and they're gonna be the ones that are kind of doing
It's a whole new
this
group.
application, so.
Yeah, it's,
But this is correct. This one was, yeah, that was probably from last week.
We can go back to the next steps.
Sure.
Actually, before we do cover, this doesn't call out the demolition specifically, is that included in the number, or is it not included?
That doesn't, I didn't include it in that number at this point.
So there'd be an additional cost if it was all different?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of refining those options.
the state does reimburse on it, as long as it's part of the overall project.
Okay.
As long as it's justified as part of the project. I did clarify that too, we weren't positive on it.
It's reimbursed as a relation.
And then there's a couple other comments that they made, which are, if you want to proceed with some special legislation to get a variance on the square footage, for example, you could. And I think it was suggested that it happens quite often, and it does happen quite often. So there's, similar to what I think you you went through special legislation to allow, I think, a fall referendum the last time. There's that caveat to all of these cases here. Okay. So,
There's also variances you can get to get relief from the square footage. It's just, you know, it's a justification process, like sell your case and get them to buy into it.
Well, we don't need 142,000 square feet.
I know. We all know that, but, you know, I mean, it's a conundrum, so, you know, we're trying to.
And we need field space, so.
Yeah, the field spaces, and part of what I think Jeff sort of started to say on those, both of the concepts that have the renovation and the new construction, the idea behind those is to renovate as new, to build new core program areas. So your 6, 7, 8 core classrooms are in the new construction. That's where it seems the curriculum is, the building itself currently doesn't keep up with the curriculum and the way they're being taught. So we would build out those new cores in the new space and then renovate the other spaces for the other academic programs, which I think will come very close to meeting what you would have in a brand new building, you know, in the same kind of education.
So the extent renovation is both a higher reimbursement and a cheaper cost,
I don't know.
right, the way to go. And the portion in that last slide, concept 4, is that the newest portion, and just pointed out, so that would, again, make sense. Renovate.
Yeah, but true, I think that's part of the exploration when you develop those options, because I think there's, like, time. There might be more time, related to a multi-phase approach to renovation. So there's logistics from an education standpoint. So those are the things that will help
calculated, it'll be, you know, phasing and how it's gonna impact the education, you know, all the different criteria, so everybody can kind of look at it and feel as though the right decisions are being made.
But would you, I mean, if you're building out in the middle of the parking lot there, and you haven't torn anything down, where are people gonna park?
So, I mean, those were pretty preliminary, more spaces, and
You could,
what we took was that brand new building idea, which is a tight footprint with the kind of core curriculum working, and then we said, all right, what if it's half and half, we just kind of popped it in to see, so they're really test diagrams, I think I'd say, more than anything else, and now we can start looking at them, and we did hear from Chris that the parking lot obviously is pretty important to keep, and we should be looking back. So we've gotten some feedback already, you know, on how to develop these moving forward.
So with that option, the short answer would be, you could put a binder course down in a portion of the field, use that temporarily. So, but you gotta kind of identify that piece and how much time that adds, so, yeah. You had a question?
Yeah, on deciding student population projection, this year we budgeted at a certain number, ended up with 60-something more kids than as I could projected.
Right.
Good number in kindergarten to the point we had to add another class.
Yep.
Our superintendent sent a memo, for lack of a better term, what happened, and they came back with X number of reasons and, you know, kind of refined sort of the projection. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this or not, but.
Yeah,
So I just want to make sure we pick the right number, we're not, and we or the board at that time is not sitting there trying to figure out where to put the portables in 10 years, because we projected on a downward trend, all of a sudden reverted and ticked up and then went up.
agreed. Yeah, we did hear that comment at one of the meetings, and
Okay.
I took a number and added it to the actual enrollment just to show how it adds to the square footage. But yeah, I agree. I mean, you have to get that number, everybody has to get that number as close to as possible.
I'm just not sure if those next steps are in December when NASDAQ provides us that study, or is it earlier than that?
It's
Well,
gotta be when, and the state's pretty rigid, and that first slide with all those words on it, and I went through the process of what they use, and we have to
Go back
take
to that
the
real quick.
if you go back to that, the 8 years is the window.
Right.
And we start in the fall, following the, you know, decision, so say this happens in the spring, we're pushing forward, so it would be the fall of 2015. 8 years moving forward from that. You can then pick your number in that period
Okay.
from the NASDAQ range. So that's, you know, kind of where, that's your win log.
But there's, 3 and 4, this is NASDAQ. If you have actual data that is wrong, it's a course correct projection, it's not, they'll listen to you. I mean, it's not.
So if the NASDAQs come out and they don't account for that year blip, then I think then you go towards 3 and 4 where you have this bona fide projection error, you know what I mean? We start looking at other options, because I do think that's
The plan that's described is flexible enough that, you know, when we're talking certain square footages now, and the ranges, which I
Yeah.
appreciate.
Yeah,
And
we
then come December and then everything gets approved and then we've got, you know, a new set of numbers or whatever from October on. How flexible is it all of a sudden these things spikes versus
Yeah.
slow growth?
your spike probably isn't gonna be 100 students, but
Right.
it's 67. 67. So, I think it's well within the range we're talking about right now.
Which
You know,
that
because we're
flexibility.
looking at, between what, high, 100,000 to 120.
Yeah, if there's a spike, then that's gonna translate out in the projection, and that's why you may wanna look at the 8 years.
Right.
And you're assuming you build for what the state allows.
That's true. You could build smaller, you could build bigger, right?
That won't be.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what they'll reimburse. And then there's all the negotiation and stuff. They did ask, just, so everything else we talked about was one of the first things, is there is a bona fide need in the town for this, and that's gonna, because they have to understand why we're trying to do this.
Sound visit.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, there's pretty much need, and there's like a community outcry, right? And I said, yeah, I think so, I'm pretty sure that's all there, so, that's just part of what we're justifying.
I think one of the things we'll add to this schedule is continuing a dialogue dialogue with them. I think it's important for them to understand as we refine those options, what we do. They seem,
So apply, when is that date of plan submission? Right there in front.
The date of plan submission would be when, yeah, it would be June.
So we
June
use the
30th.
October, we use the projections for the following.
No, you use the.
yes, yes, you do.
But
You
those
use this
projections-
year's projection, you use the information that they're giving you this year, but you can use the next year
Number.
number. That's what that clarifies.
I have a question just on short-term timing. Tom, you mentioned referendum in the spring. What month are we talking about starting?
I don't know that we've got that close to pick a month or a specific date, but when we originally, or I guess reformed as the building committee, one of the things that we talked about was the schedule, and we just said, we're engaging Tecton to get to a spring referendum. And that's about as defined as we've got it versus fall. So we've talked all along about spring.
Are we talking before the first week in May, or?
If there's a date that you would prefer that it be, we can try and target that date. But as of right now, we haven't been given a date specific.
I think that's something that we need to have some conversation around before we get down further.
And we understand there could also be a possibility that the town may decide that it's not spring. But until told differently, the building committee's direction is spring, and that's what we're working towards.
Our budget referendum is over May, so we either are well ahead of that or behind it, you don't want to be at the same time.
That was a comment not made. Our goal is to be done with our end of it sometime early winter, you know, January, so that we're keeping the committee and you guys everything you need to get the community on board, so there can be workshops, and not that we wouldn't be involved, but from a standpoint of having a finished, you know, product, so to speak, so we can talk about it. So I think you're gonna need that time here to get.
So we're gonna need another tri-board meeting sooner than later, because until they said they need like 3 weeks to get scheduled, how are we be thinking about it?
Especially with, you know, November, December.
Right. Probably suggest some dates on it, similar
Should we be looking for a month from now?
to long.
I don't know that that's a month from now is enough time, because the building committee will only meet twice. Not that we can't meet more often, but
Probably 6 weeks out.
like mid-December maybe,
Right after next year.
maybe mid-December.
Ron, you wanna wait until after the message?
I don't know if you can be pretty late. Yeah, those won't be until
Mid-December.
December, yeah, close to vacation.
We're gonna continue, you know, working, using the assumptions that we have. And obviously, we'll be able to fine tune when we get that stuff, but I don't think we're gonna stop and wait.
I don't think you'll see that dramatic a swing where we can't course correct.
Yeah,
I think we should meet and then just see where it goes.
All right.
Yeah, good.
We looked at the NASDAQ numbers from last year, and we received them on December 19th.
Oh, wow.
Since we've engaged in conversation, I'm optimistic, I don't know why, that they're gonna put us at the top of the list since they're wrong. So, I'm seeing this through.
Get rid of them.
But I think, Jeff, on that point, even if the numbers are close to what we have, or they're a little higher, they're a little lower, at this point, it doesn't make a significant difference. We're gonna be in that, you saw the ranges of like in the high 90,000 to the low 120, somewhere in that 115, 130. We're gonna be in that range, and at this point, if it's 102,000 versus 106,000, doesn't really make a lot of difference at this point. So while it's important information to have, I don't think it's a showstopper that we can't progress these concepts while we're waiting for that data and then tweak it at the end a little bit. I just would be reluctant to have the project wait until late December. And I think that would really take us way off schedule.
Could I propose December 10th, which is 8 weeks? Wednesday, December 10th, which is 8 weeks from tonight.
Sounds like a good day.
Yeah, I think that's probably fine, and I think by then we'll have presented a few times to the building committee and have good feedback, and might have even gotten in on all this.
I can throw that out. With enough it's enough lead time, so either that or your meeting before. But that would make sense, yeah, because we need to try boards, so let's do it both on the 10th.
I mean, I like to try to get them to our meeting on the 5th for the funding discussion.
Funding discussion.
November 5th. So we don't need the ACA now, we don't rush on that.
So the 10th is not fine, it's not.
None of the boards meet that night, so we go Wednesday.
We're not in board finance.
This isn't the board finance, so we do 7.
December 7th.
December 10th at 7 p.m.
So I have an observation I'd like to share. We talked about the student enrollment and what number we should use. One of the big levers, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that caught it, was that whether or not that second gym counts against the square footage of this project. Right? And I'm not going to profess or even say that we should make that decision anytime soon, but I think we should explore the options about, what if we did decide to give that second gym to the town and not count it to the school? And how open is the state to that? And if they were open to it, what would the restrictions be, right? Could a student never go into that building during school hours, or, what the conditions would be for them to consider that? Because if you can wipe the square footage of that second gym off the project, which really is not a fair assessment over what the state should be reimbursing us for. That's a big lever as to what we can build.
And that's a perfect special legislation type thing too, not just asking for a waiver, there's a real reason. The community needs that lighting facility, it's there, it's in good shape.
Yeah, no, I actually kind of carried that conversation off of them, and I asked her, Paige, when I came back and forth, and I said, well, hypothetically, the town just assumed all costs for anything that dealt with the school, separate, because obviously, you have to pay anything else for whatever you're doing. And she kind of carried it in the other direction, saying, well, it would just be a different reimbursement rate, because there would be the assumption that the kids would still continue to use it, which was interesting, because I wasn't going there, So I think, she's like, no, it's just a conversation, and there needs to be clarity, and, you define it right up front, so there's an understanding of how it's worked. Paige, Warren.
She's leaving?
No, she's still there. She's not very new, it's all new.
No, I think that would be.
Yes, no, she's familiar with the project, yeah, but,
She's on the grant side.
so,
I know our conversation had been around really more community use, because I don't know, and the administrators here, that there's a particular school need for the second gym.
There is.
yeah.
There are 3 PE classes that go on at one time, so trying to put 3 PE classes in one gym is difficult.
So no, I think there is sort of a story there that we can start, and now that we know enough, as we start pushing more development a little bit further forward.
We like to keep.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I think it's.
Figure out how best to do that. I was hoping that you didn't need it, it'd be simpler.
It's worth asking, right? Now's the time, because there's no other dependency that stops you from pursuing that discussion.
The the gym with all its space around it, the locker rooms and the.
It's about 16,000.
They should 10,000 square feet, right there.
That's all the storage and lockers, all the, if it was like kind of a standalone.
That should come with a high projection down and a little low projection right there.
Just briefly go for pictures or
Sure. Okay, concept one, first floor plan. Gym renovation of this portion of the existing building. New dining, these will be specialty spaces, the band, all the arts, gym, specialty again, gym. Administration, media center, this would be new.
It's a two-story.
Two-story, sixth grade there, the upper level, this would all remain one story. The upper level would have 7th and 8th. All of this portion would be removed. Concept 2 is all new, so this is an entirely new building. Gym, specialty space, dining, media center, administration, so that would be kind of the main entrance. 6th grade pod, and then 7th and 8th pod. So similar. Obviously, all of this will be removed. And it's close to the street. Concept 3, again, all new. Same kind of setup, administration, media center, 6th, 7th, and 8th in that pod. Specialty spaces and gymnasium, and then dining down on the end. And as I mentioned, that you could possibly put corridors or a vestibule here to kind of use nighttime use and separate the building. That's it. You could do it on this one as well, but this sets up a little cleaner for it. And then concept 4 is we would keep this portion of the existing building, the gymnasium, and renovate like new dining. We remove the center portion of this existing building. We put a new 2-story addition, administration, media center, 6th grade, and then 7th and 8th above, similar to the other plans. Keep the gym and specialty, renovate, and give the specialty spaces on. I think we were looking at this piece to kind of create the new hub where we could potentially look at all kind of the building systems, the infrastructure, and kind of extend those out to the existing portions of the building that would remain but be renovated. And then the second floor of that is 7th Street. So consistent amongst all the plans is these pods that we're trying to.
Jeff, just we'll make this information available. We just had it sent to us late this afternoon, so we haven't obviously posted it yet on the town website or anything like that. But the pictures and the charts and all that we'll make available to everyone, obviously all the citizens as well through the town. We just haven't been able to deliver that file yet. We'll take care of that, if not tomorrow, the next day. I do want to add one thought. There's some discussion about the population and the square footage and how they're linked, but the building committee is not married to the concept that we're going to build as big as we can. Now we've heard several times the idea of what happened in the past, and Bacon was built small, and then the population got big, and then the portables came in, and we understand that. But we're not necessarily moving forward with the concept that we're going to build it as big as we possibly can, because that may not be the right decision for the town. So I think it's important for everyone to hear that we're not operating under the mindset as big as we can. That's not our goal in this. We want to make it the right size based upon reasonable projections and reasonable cost that we can. So I think it's important that everybody clearly understands we're not just trying to build it as big as we can. That's not the goal of the project. At least that's not the direction we've been given.
because of unfortunate circumstance, Hawkins representative is not able to present tonight. We will reschedule that presentation on the ACA. We'll do it on the 10th. Hopefully they'll be able to be here with enough lead time. Okay. Next item for the tri-board meeting, any citizens' comments?